This is Warren County Community College's UAS 109 CRM video number 6 on Crews as Groups, Formation and Leadership. So let's start with an introduction of the concept, if you will. So what we're going to talk about today is how do we move from a well-trained individual to this kind of crew member responsibility? How do we get people to go from the individual to the crew perspective? And what is kind of the differentiation and the difference in the two? So we know that for safety to be realized and risks to be minimized, crew must evolve from multiple perspectives of numerous competent individuals to the collective competence of the team. So what does that mean? I have to somehow, as the leader, as the remote pilot in command, as the crew manager, move all these well-informed, well-intentioned individuals acting as independent actors into an interdependent team where I bring the collective of this competence and intelligence, perseverance, all the things we talked about, together into a high-performing team. How do we go about doing that? So in order to do that, we have to understand the difference between groups, teams, and crews. And they're not really, there's not like, okay, group ends here, team begins here. A team is a group. A crew should be a team. Might not be. A crew could only be a group. So we're going to do a little bit of what this, kind of like the sociologists do today, to understand this concept of groups, teams, and crews and what it means. So let's start with groups. So the sociologists are going to define this along the lines of something along two or more people who come together for a common reason, a common role, common purpose, a common objective, but they remain interdependent. Okay, they're not dependent on one another necessarily. They're independent actors. They're interdependent in that they're there for that purpose. But are they a team? Do they act collectively? Do they share the same mindset? So, you can think of things like a large protest. Is everyone there for the exact same reason? I mean, they may be there for a reason, but their individual reasons for being there could be very different. Anytime you see this, a group attends a stadium for an athletic event. They may all be rooting for the same team or one of two teams, and that does give them some similarity. They're not the team. I know sometimes people think they're the team, but you're in the stands. You're just part of the group. You're a spectator. So how do we move from this concept of group to a more cohesive, greater interdependence where even they become dependent upon one another? So speaking of my favorite team, there's the Eagles winning the Super Bowl. Always have to find a way to sneak that in there. Team's a little bit different. That's a highly specialized group of people. A group is an assemblage of individuals with common traits or a situation, whereas the team, okay, so everybody in the stand, they're there for a common situation to watch the game. But the team is structured and organized arrangement, defined number of individuals. Okay, you're going to have so many people on the field at a time. You're going to have so many on the team. Team members are selected by their skill or expertise. So I know that in Philadelphia, everybody in the stands, because I've been there all my life, thinks they could coach that team, but they can't. All right? They don't have the skill or the expertise to do it. They just have an opinion. Remember the difference between skill, expertise, and opinion. We've seen in the modern era where people think, oh, I have an opinion. That's equal to somebody who has skill and expertise. Because I could create a YouTube video like this one and say everything that Dr. Austin just said was wrong. Well, that's fine. That's an opinion. You have a right to it, and I have a right to not agree with it. But we're not a team, all right? We're a team when we all bring a skill set together that can work collaboratively and cohesively, all right? Because we have a team goal collectively, and our team goal in aviation, fulfill the mission, but start with safety and risk mitigation to mission fulfillment. That's our collective goal. get everybody home safe. So a crew is a group, should be a team, but everything here is a matter of degree. Okay? So if your crew is all people who met each other that very day, they're probably not a team. Does that mean they can't effectively fulfill the mission and the operation because they all know? Yes. But are they a cohesive group? They might be. They might be so well trained they can come together and follow the standard operating procedures. But do they have faith in one another? Do they believe in one another? These are concepts we have to think about, and it's always a matter of degree. So it's up to you. Who's responsible? You are. Your leadership role as a remote pilot in command is to make your crew not a group, but a team. So that's how I'm going to approach this. Somebody else might approach this very differently. You might approach it. You might take everything you learn in this course, and your leadership might be very different. So remember that. The goal is to have a highly effective team focused on safety through risk mitigation to fulfillment of whatever mission is there. How do we build this team in a culture that still, because of its origins, is going to value this idea of the solo flight or that adventurer? We have to think about that. How do we move? I know we talk about this in the 1970s, this kind of began in aviation. And that certainly seems like, if we take from 1970 to today, 50 years, seems like that would have been enough time, especially since aviation isn't that old. But we know these things, it's hard to change culture. All right, so you're still going to find elements of this out there. And just the idea of RPIC, remote piloting command, that really gives you a feeling of authority. All right, it reinforces this notion, especially to the newly initiated. I'm in command. That means I get to tell people what to do. Well, leadership's a little bit more complicated than that, as we're going to find out. All right, so let's talk about some of the issues we have with teams. Here's some examples. Okay, it's not an exhaustive list. It's just to give you a perspective. Some teams can be successful with no individuals of exceptional ability. This is true. This is true. So, you know, people will use different examples. I might use the examples of the 1980s Redskins teams under Joe Gibbs. When you look back at those teams, yeah, there were some superstars. Most of them, like Joe Theismann, got hurt. But it really was, Joe Gibbs was great at taking a collective of people no one else probably could have won a Super Bowl with and winning Super Bowls by wide margins. That's building a team, a very successful team, with no individuals of exception. So there's not a superstar there. The people often talk about the Miracle on Ice, the 80s hockey team that beat the Russians, the Soviet Union in the Olympics. These were not, every one of them was an exceptional person. Let me start there. But there wasn't really that person on the team who was better than everybody else. Better. This guy's so good. I'll give you another example. I believe it was 80. It was around 88 Olympics. You had John Thompson. It was the last time they were in the basketball game. There were amateurs. We went to professionals after that in the Olympics. But John Thompson, legendary coach of Georgetown, he brought his favorite prospect for his team, Alonzo Mourning, on there. It was a disaster. We lost the Olympics. We had to go to professionals after that. There was this person of exceptional ability, without question, that John was training for his collegiate career. But someone, critic like me, might argue that cost us the Olympic gold medal that year. Because that one superstar wasn't enough, which really brings us to the next one. Some teams do rely around that person to rally around and succeed. That person of an exceptional ability. All right, LeBron James comes to mind. Michael Jordan comes to mind, although, people might argue that was a pretty good team. Okay, there have been these people who could carry a team. They're clutch players. So there are teams that have that. There are some teams of numerous stars that can never come together for success. We've seen this in baseball, professional basketball. People try to buy all the superstars, throw them on a team, and we'll win the championship. Now we have all the best players. They never can come together. So we see this. I'm sorry for those of you who don't like sports analogies. I guess I watch more sports than I recall. So in essence, in these three examples, and there are numerous other ways you can kind of do this. These are the ones that I'm doing today. There's an issue of this idea of synergy. Are people brought together? Can we train for synergy? Can we train for cohesiveness? Or does someone have to lead to that? These are some things for you to consider as you work on your own crews and your own leadership. So how are we going to get there? How are we going to get this great team? Well, let's talk about, again, let's go back to what the sociologists might call the social construction of teams. Right? How do we construct it? How do we get them to a functional level so that we can then lead to a high performance level? Well, one of the ways is by creating boundaries. What are the roles? What are the boundaries? For me to fit into this role, I have to know what it's defined as. What is my standard operating procedure? What are the roles? What is my role on the team? What is everybody's unique role? So setting up this kind of hierarchy. But remember, in roles, you're always going to have conflict. So how well you define them or socially construct this group into a team will matter. And when you leave too much ambiguity and things aren't well defined in the boundaries and in the roles, then you're going to have more conflict and you're going to have a less effective team. Couple that with your normative patterns, your organizational culture here, or societal influences that people think are normal. So if your culture doesn't emphasize safety, your team won't. If your leadership doesn't emphasize safety, your team won't. Right? And what's your status of your team? What's your experience and competence level? Okay, that's going to matter too in here. If everybody is brand new, there's nobody model the behavior of. If you're brand new as a remote pilot in command, I mean, you've gone through the academic exercises, you've practiced, but now you're out there for the first time on your own. You picked up a complex mission that you probably shouldn't have, and you have a novice team. The confidence level won't be there. And then, in the social construction of teams, how do you exercise authority? Okay, there are a lot of ways to lead. There are a lot of ways to influence others. And there's a lot of authority mechanisms that give you command. Is yours based on structure? Is it defined by position? Can you influence through your personality? Can you influence through your fairness? What is your leadership style? How do you exercise that authority and command? This is all going to matter when you're trying to develop a team. Because in the end, it's more than command. Oh, wouldn't the world be nice if I'm the captain? So let's save a lot of time. Easiest thing to do is just realize that I'm always right. What a wonderful world that would be for leaders. That's not reality. Okay. I've seen people practice leadership this way. It is abysmal failure every single time. You have to realize that in order to be a leader, people have to be willing to follow you. Now, you may say, well, I paid them. I work for people like, well, they follow me because I paid them. They say they follow you, but do they? It's got to be more than command. It's got to be more than just relying on the norms. You've got to be redefining them constantly because the world around you is being redefined. And, well, first and most importantly, I think, and what's often lost to this is you got to develop your followers beyond command and control. Loyalty, respect, the willingness of themselves to sacrifice for your vision, for your implementation, for your commands. And there are numerous others. Followers are a complicated idea. Go well beyond what we're going to be able to do in this course. So in order to do this, let's go back and let's talk about leadership again. And some of this will be repetitive of last time, so I'll be kind of quick about it. Remember, and I want to reemphasize this, the heart of community resource management is leadership. You will influence thoughts, actions, and the culture that you set as the remote pilot in command, even if it's just the culture on your team. If your organizational norms or the organization you're working for are not safety focused, your leadership certainly should be. Create involvement and a shared commitment. Bring your people together in collaboration. If all you do is tell them what to do, you have created dependent actors who cannot think for themselves. If all you do is criticize, you've created people who only think they can do wrong. They will never believe in themselves. Rise above it. Remember, you're the remote pilot in command. You make the decisions. Do it fairly. Do it justly. Do it with the communication of your crew. Do it collaboratively. Do it well. Well, you're here. You're in this course. You chose to be a leader. Sorry about that. Welcome to the club. There are leadership characteristics that emerge in stressful situations, for better or worse. Remember that. You will never escape your need to lead as the remote pilot in command. Characteristics: competence, communication skills, decision-making skills, decisiveness, perseverance, sense of responsibility, emotional stability and enthusiasm, image and ethics, recognition, sensitivity and flexibility, humor and stamina. Think about all of these. Take a minute. I'm going to give it about 5 seconds. Take a screenshot. Take a picture. Take these to heart. Begin your life's journey about developing these characteristics in yourself. Step number 1. Don't take yourself so seriously. Let's talk about training here. For leadership, you can train. No one is born a leader. People develop into leaders. They develop their own skills and competence. First thing, establish competence. Do not try to lead something you do not understand. You will fail. Work constantly. Become the smartest person in the room. Read, read, read. Here's the easiest thing you can do. Read everything I've given you for this course. Read everything Warren has put together. Read every other thing every other instructor in this program gives to you. Read it all. So many people refuse to read today. It's the easiest way to competence. Think about what you've read. Think about how this article ties into this other article, ties into this book. Think about how they all converge into a single set of ideals and standards that will be your competent leadership, and work on that. Train for competence. Make your crew competent. Okay, if you're a person who wings it, a person who doesn't read, who hasn't stayed up on the industry, how is anyone going to believe in you? You have to model the behavior. You have to set the standard. Disavow the notion of perfection. Get rid of it. Everyone fails. Everyone makes mistakes. The second you realize you are not perfect is your journey to a better you. Continuous improvement. Empower your people to point out your weaknesses as leader and the weaknesses within themselves, but in a constructive, non-conflict, non-demeaning way. Remember, you can't do it all. You need these other people. But if they're counting on you to do it all or to make every decision perfectly, you will fail. Engage your crew. Brief before a mission, debrief after a mission. Work on the team building skills we're going to go over in here. Constantly be thinking, oh yeah, this is about aviation. This is about drones. This is about unmanned systems. But it's also about building a great team. And you have to manage the social elements. And there are many of them. The world changes all the time. From a newspaper article, from a perspective, from media. But nothing stays consistent. Everything is constantly in a state of flux and flow right now. You have to lead to the management of that for your crew. Okay? If you have a crew member who is distracted because of interpersonal problems, that worst place that person can be is at work that day. If they're going to endanger the entire mission or people around you, you can take their horrible situation in life that they're going through and make it catastrophic. Manage these social relations, manage these conflicts, manage all of that. That's your role as leader. Seems you might be saying, well, what isn't my role as leader? And I'm going to tell you, these days, probably not much isn't your role as a leader. So the famous stuff, it's hard to even say who. The one on the left is Larry V. Cobble from the School of Leadership Services. You see this redrawn many ways. I'm not sure what the initial origin is. I can't tell you at this point in my career. If someone knows and wants to email me, that's great. But here's where we are. Let's talk about the team at work in the middle. Let's move our way out. So these are known as organizational shells. I got two different ones. The one from the left is more business, and then the one from the right has been used somewhat in aviation crew, and you can see they're almost identical. So outside of the team, at their outer circle is the environment. These are the social factors. This could be the weather. This could be, it could be anything external to the industry, the organization, group formation, and the team. Okay, so you got the environment. Then you have an industry you're working within. Okay, so that's going to be, in this world, UAS operation, the UAS industry, the aviation industry. There could be several, actually. Then there's going to be an organization. So when you're flying at the college, the organization is Warren Community College. Then there's going to be a group formation. So that can be your class. That could be your assigned group to work on it as a crew. You may not have any, just like you go to work for somebody. You end up with somebody. Somebody else did the hiring. You don't always have a say. How do you get to them be a team? A couple of ways. One, the tasks need to be well defined and well understood by everyone involved. And those tasks should not deviate from the environment, industry, organization, or groups formation. But they should be clear to the team. Then we have these ideas we've talked about called norms, normative patterns, normal behavior. These patterns of behavior that evolve that, are just understood in the industry. You got to keep your eye on the drone. It's kind of an understood in the industry. Beyond visual line of sight is, something we aspire to. Flying over people, something we aspire to. Okay? But there's normal behaviors. There's norms we expect. Then there are boundaries. And I don't think they fall without. Here's your standard operating procedures. Here's your operations manual, your SMS, and then your authority. Who's in charge? Is it the air boss? Is it the remote pilot in command? That's the one on the left. Let's move to the one on the right. As you can see, it's basically the same thing. The one difference is composition, which I think is interesting when we talk about crews, and the one from the right is really the one that I've gotten that comes from the aviation industry. It's been working often. We lose this notion of the boundary. And see, I think this should be a 5 arrow, because I think those boundaries, those procedures, those policies, the 4 Ps we talked about in the previous video are really important here. But I think in our crew, the composition is important, and we should be thinking about that. We do this in organizational management a lot. We look at composition. We try to do things like Myers-Briggs. We try to do emotional intelligence. We try to do decision-making intelligence, all kinds of things psychologists put out for us to understand interpersonal relations, if you will. Well, that will matter. And so you can start to see here, I thought I came to this college to learn about drones. Now I'm learning about management. I'm learning about leadership. I'm learning about the psychological differentiation of human beings. This all comes when you deal with people. So the great self-help guru Earl Nightingale says everything we're ever going to do in life is either with, through, or by people. Okay, we are social animals. So, don't diminish this idea of these organizational shells. Think about this. Think about this from a very kind of global or high 30,000 foot kind of perspective and start to say, all right, well, are the norms, could they be affecting safety in my team? Could my leadership or my authority? Could the composition? Look for the weaknesses in your team. Be looking to constantly and continuously improve your team as much as you possibly can and build towards that. All right? Sometimes you got to swap out a team member. You got to do a restructuring, a reshuffling. This happens in every industry. There's nothing novel about this. The novelty is when you picked up that robot that first day, did you think you'd have to think this way? That's what I want you thinking about right now. So what are the threats to your leadership? Or, and a lot of these are your own. They're threats to yourself. And we all fall victim to these. We have people we don't like, and then we begin to undermine that. And we can undermine the entire crew by criticizing, by picking on one person, by bullying, by, these kind of social interactions that aren't perfect. Don't do it. Don't undermine your crew. Don't ever abdicate your responsibility. Okay? Don't be the leader who always is never at fault. If anything goes wrong and you're the RPIC, you are responsible. Accept that responsibility. Say, you know what? Rollo over there totally screwed that mission. Screwed it up completely. But I was his leader. If he failed, that was a failure of my leadership. Be that person. People will respect that leader. Don't fail to affirm task definitions, boundaries, norms, and the authority dynamics. You don't have to have this knowledge that I just gave you a second ago of organizational shells and say, oh, this is my secret knowledge. It's okay to tell your people this is why we do it this way. It's okay to share what you've learned in this video. Heck, just give them the link. I'll tell them. If you're working for somebody else and you're undermining their leadership, you're going to get somebody hurt. Stop it. Right? These are good practices. These are good perspectives to bring to the table. So, affirm the tasks. That's what you do in your briefing, pre-flight briefing. Affirm the boundaries. Your operations manual, your SOPs, your SMS. Affirm the norms. And explain your authority dynamics. Why do you operate your crew this way? You always want them communicating back. It's not a dictatorship, but you have a leadership style. Explain what it is. Tell people, hey, for some people they might be like, I don't do well in this kind of leadership. Fantastic. There's other crews for you to be a part of. You don't have to be part of this one. Okay? But be true to yourself. Be authentic. Do not fail to always elaborate and expand upon any and all of your communications. Do this consistently and constantly. All right? Always be elaborating, always expanding, always sharing knowledge. Try to create in your crew people who are as competent and as experienced as you are as the leader. This will make for better group dynamics. People are always afraid to do this, like, well, so-and-so will stop listening to me. Okay, well, then so-and-so should become their own pilot. They should move on, right? And there's nothing wrong with that either. Let's talk about the Tuckman model of team formation. This is a very famous model, so you're going to go through this with your crew if you really want to get them to be a team, and this will be a lot of what we talk about in the lectures coming up in class or on the remote. First thing is forming. So it's forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. And sometimes there isn't an adjourning. So storming, norming, forming, storming, norming, performing is sometimes how this is also said. So forming. Team acquaints and establishes ground rules, boundaries, tasks, SOPs, leadership authority. Formalities are preserved, and the members are treated as strangers. So they're coming together. The crew, hey, how are you? I'm so-and-so. I went here. This is my experience level. You're forming up. Storming. Next step. Members start to communicate their feelings, but still view themselves as individuals. Remember, this was what we asked in the very beginning of this lecture. How do we move from the level of the individual to the level of individual competence to group collective competence. This is the pattern that we go through. Members start to communicate their feelings, but still view themselves as individuals rather than part of a team. They resist control of the group leaders and show hostility. So you're going to get this at first. Look, you want to get to a team. So you're in the aviation. Hierarchy is generally well accepted in this industry. Some industries it's not accepted at all. Some industries, medical, academic, we often talk about leaders as kind of people who herd cats. If you think about that concept. Here it should be a little bit easier. There's a certain dynamic and culture of authority that rests here. Certain respect for the captain. Okay? That rests here. But you're still going to get this kind of maybe diminished. It may not be overt. It may be covert hostility. All right? People don't like necessarily to be led. So you got to move them through this. So you're going to get this. So don't take it personally. Don't let it diminish your leadership. Don't hold other people like, I'm going to hate you for the rest of your life. You said something negative about me and I overheard you when you were getting caught. Yeah, this happens all the time. Accept it. Great. People always criticize the leader. It's part of America. All right? So what? You'll survive it. Trust me, you're the leader. All right? Storming. Then the normative patterns will start. Norming will come into effect. People feel part of a team. They start to say, it's not so bad. It does it a little bit different, but, when I think about it, it's 99% of what I'm used to. They start to come to this. They start to realize that they can work well together if they accept everybody else's opinion and viewpoints. And here you're working on communication, so you got them to the norm. Once you've done that, you can move to the next stage of team development, which is the performing stage. Team works in an open and trusting atmosphere. So, if you want trust on your team, you have to be a trustworthy individual. If you gossip, if you talk about people behind their backs, no one's going to trust you. So, in order to have trust, you must be trustworthy. And you should look for trustworthiness as an attribute of other members of your team. Once you have that trust, people will feel more free to communicate. So watch things like teasing. I was just making jokes. These diminish other people. Okay? There was a time and if you're an older person, you're like, well, this hazing is how we got to be what we wanted to be. That time is over. All right? Don't do it. Be the trustworthy leader that people can count on, that they can communicate to, where the normative patterns are set by high expectations and examples rather than ripping people down. Build everybody up. And you say to me, well, there's some people you can't build up. Get them off your crew. All right? That's a simple solution. Stop trying to develop people who will never develop. Okay? At least not under your leadership. They may work well under somebody else. Help them. Send them there. All right? So you have a trusting atmosphere. Trust doesn't mean you have low expectations. It means you have even higher expectations. It's kind of one of the things people think, oh, they'll trust me more if I set the expectation low and I don't give them constructive criticism. Constructive criticism is important. It's good. It's your responsibility, along with everything else. Flexibility is key. And the hierarchy becomes of little importance. It's a little bit different in the aviation. We must maintain some degree of this hierarchy. But people can follow a leader without realizing, without thinking of it as an authority structure. They can think of it as, I put my trust in that person. I believe in them. And it changes the dynamic, and that's what you're after here. Then there's this final concept of adjourning. The team conducts an assessment of the year and implements. Well, you're going to assess at every debriefing because your crew might diminish. It might just disband at that point. Okay, in manned aviation, we see this. Crews come together on an airline, they come apart. So the training has to be universal. So you have to kind of set the same kind of expectation. So that's why you have your SOPs, your operations manual, your SMO. You're starting to see a pattern here. All right. Plan for transitioning roles and recognizing contributions. They're in adjourning. Let's call this forming, storming, norming, performing, celebrating. because that's what you want to do. When the mission is over, you want to celebrate. You want to celebrate nobody got hurt. You want to emphasize how great everybody did. All right? Then you want to talk about the deltas. Don't do it as criticism. Okay, what could we have done better? Always using a positive reinforcement. Try to work that way. I'm Dr. Will Austin. This is Warren Community College. We'll see you in the next video. Good luck forming your teams.